Peace be with you, strangers. I don't really know how to begin this, or if it is even lawful for me to speak this way, but my soul feels crowded. Like there are too many voices inside my head, and not all of them belong to God. I am a monk of St. Michael's Abbey, high in the hills above our little village. Our days are simple and predictable, at least they used to be. We rise at midnight for matins, then lauds at dawn. We copy manuscripts in the scriptorium until our eyes burn, tend the gardens, chant the psalms, eat in silence while one brother reads from the fathers. We confess, we keep watch, we sleep. Repeat. In theory, there is order here. In theory, there is peace. Lately, there is neither. At first, it was small things, the kind you'd brush off as forgetfulness. A psalter not where I left it. A candle snuffed when I was certain it had been lit. The key to the sacristy gone from its hook for an hour, only to appear again with no explanation and no guilty face among the brothers. But then the little disturbances started lining up in my mind, like beads on a rosary, and I realized they all shared a kind of wrongness. Not the clumsy chaos of human error. Something deliberate, something almost playful, the way a cat toys with a mouse before the end. If you enjoy stories like this, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel Prophet's Lens. It truly motivates me to create even more interesting stories for you. And please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'm honestly very curious to see how far these stories travel. Thank you all for your understanding and support. Our prior brother Anselm used to smile easily. Now his smile looks nailed on, as if he's wearing his own face like a mask. The cellarer, who once counted every bean, has miscounted so often that we've had to water the wine twice this month. Two brothers who never spoke more than a pax to each other now whisper together in corners, falling silent whenever I approach. At night, the walls themselves seem restless. The wind through the cloister arches has always sounded like distant chanting, but lately it carries words, half-phrases I can't quite catch. My name sometimes, or so it seems. Maybe my mind is just tired, but when I walk alone after Compline, I feel watched. Not in the comforting way of the saints whose relics we keep, but in the way a man feels watched in a dark forest, hand on his knife. The abbot says we must resist superstition. The devil loves an imagination without a bridle, he told me, hand heavy on my shoulder. And yet his eyes slid away from mine as he spoke, as if he were hiding something just behind them. The tipping point, for me anyway, came 3 nights ago. We keep the most precious manuscripts in a locked chest in the scriptorium. A gospel book with bright blue and red illuminations, a commentary on Job, and a small, dark leather codex whose origin no one speaks of openly. I've only seen it once, when I was first allowed into the scriptorium as a novice. Its pages smelled wrong, like metal and rain, and the script inside curved in ways that made my head ache. I woke in the middle of the night. No bell, no call for prayer, just a jolt, heart pounding, as if someone had whispered directly into my ear, "Get up!" The dormitory was silent. All the brothers breathed deeply in their beds. Yet I felt this pull, this heavy certainty that I needed to go to the scriptorium. That's not normal. Obedience is normal. Bells are normal. Voices in one's ear that no one else hears? Not normal. I tried to pray it away. Deliver me from evil, O Lord. But the feeling only sharpened, like a hand gripping my chest. So I slipped from my bed, wrapped my cloak around me, and went. And that's when I saw the first really impossible thing. All right, so picture this. The scriptorium at night is usually the safest place in the abbey. It's cold, yes, and smells like dust and vellum, but it's orderly, familiar. A monk could pray himself calm just by looking at the neat rows of ink pots and sharpened quills. But that night, the moment I stepped inside, the air felt disturbed, stirred, like water after something large has moved beneath the surface. The moonlight came in through the high windows in thin, pale bars. I remember thinking it looked like the inside of a ribcage. Maybe that should have been my first clue to turn back. The manuscript chest was open. That chest hasn't been open at night in all the years I've lived here. It requires 2 keys, one held by the abbot, the other by Brother Anselm. Neither man was anywhere near the scriptorium. And yet, the lid sat wide open, its iron hinges gleaming like wet stone. The gospel book was still there. The Job commentary too. But the little dark codex, the one whose ink bends light and makes your eyes feel too small, was gone. My knees went weak. I actually had to grip one of the writing desks to stay upright. Because here's the thing. That codex isn't supposed to be read. Not even by us. It's kept locked away precisely because too many strange stories cling to it. The kind of stories we pretend not to believe in. The kind that make the older monks clear their throats and change the subject. I whispered, "Who's here?" Before I even realized I had spoken aloud. Something answered. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like the shape of a voice, sliding through the rafters. A breath that wasn't wind. A change in the air pressure. A subtle stirring of dust motes that moved as if guided by intention. It didn't form words, but somehow it felt directed at me. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. I'm not mad. At least, I don't think I'm mad. I heard footsteps then. Light ones, fast. Too fast for any of my brothers. They darted down the hallway behind me, disappearing toward the cloister. I turned, heart slamming against my ribs, but saw nothing except the swaying shadows cast by the moon. When I looked back into the scriptorium, the chest, God help me, the chest was closed again. Just like that. No sound. No hand on the lid. One blink, open. The next blink, shut. I can't explain what happened next except to say that my legs simply carried me away, as if they had made a decision without consulting me. I nearly ran into Brother Odo outside the refectory. He asked why I was awake, but his eyes weren't right. They were wide, too wide, like he'd been crying or praying too hard. He held a candle, and the flame fuzzed strangely at the edges, as though the air around him weren't fully still. All he said was, "Best not wander at night, brother." But the way he said it wasn't advice. It was warning. When I asked him if he'd heard anything unusual, he smiled. Tight, false, like someone pulling a stitch through skin. "Nothing at all," he said. Then he walked away without waiting for my reply. I didn't sleep until the sky began to pale. And ever since that night, the Abbey has felt less like a house of God and more like a place listening for something, waiting for it, even. And I'm terrified that I might be the only one who realizes it. I wish I could tell you things calmed down after that night, but the truth is they only grew stranger. Like the entire Abbey was shifting out of alignment, one stone at a time. You know how a place you've lived in for years can suddenly feel foreign? Like someone rearranged the furniture in the dark? That's what St. Michael's feels like now. Familiar bones, unfamiliar spirit. 2 mornings after the codex vanished, I noticed something during prime. We were chanting Psalm 63. In the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. And I realized 3 voices were missing. Not absent, not silent. Missing. As if their tones were cut out of the air mid-syllable. I looked around, discreetly, and the brothers were all there, bodies present, mouths moving. But the sound didn't match the number of voices in the room. It made my skin go cold under my habit. After the office, I approached Brother Thomas, who normally sings loudly enough to rattle the icons. "Your voice seems tired today," I said, trying to sound casual. He blinked at me like he didn't understand the words. Then he said, "I didn't chant this morning, brother. I wasn't called. But he was there. I saw him. I watched his lips form every verse. When I told him so, he shook his head slowly, as though deciding whether I was joking or confessing something heretical. I was in my cell, praying," he insisted, and then walked away before I could press him further. By midday, the tension among the brothers had thickened. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. A few of them flinched when I greeted them, as if they weren't expecting me to be standing where I was. One brother, gentle, quiet Brother Matthew, grabbed my wrist when I passed him in the cloister and whispered, Keep your head down. His fingers were trembling. From what? I asked. He opened his mouth, but then someone, stepped into the walkway behind me. Matthew's face went white. He dropped my wrist and hurried off so fast he nearly tripped over his robe. When I turned, no one was there, just the wind curling around the arches. Later that evening, an argument erupted in the refectory. We're not supposed to speak during meals, but the cellarer shouted at Brother Paul, accusing him of stealing bread. Paul swore by the chalice he hadn't touched it. Their voices rose, fists clenched, their faces red as if lit by fire. The abbot had to intervene, his tone sharp, colder than usual. When he ordered silence, everyone obeyed, but the silence that followed didn't feel like obedience. Felt like fear. And then, just after Compline, I heard it. A whisper in the cloister walk. Clear, close, almost intimate. Return it. I spun around, heart hammering. The walkway was empty, moonlight stretching long across the stones. But the whisper lingered in my bones. And something deep inside me, some instinct older than scripture, told me it meant the missing codex. But I never touched that book. I never opened it. I've avoided it all my life. So why does whatever haunts our walls think I have it? Or worse, why does it want me to return it? By the next morning, I'd worked myself into a kind of quiet panic. I kept replaying that whisper, return it, like a chant I didn't want to memorize. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty place in the manuscript chest where the codex should have been, like a missing tooth in the abbey's smile. I tried to go about the day as if nothing was wrong, but the brothers seemed even more strained than before. Brother Odo dropped a whole stack of wax tablets in the cloister and didn't even stop to pick them up. Brother Matthew avoided my gaze entirely. And Brother Paul, the one accused of stealing bread, looked hollow like he hadn't slept at all. His hands shook during terce. He spilled ink all over the lectern, and no one scolded him. Felt like everyone was unraveling in slow motion. By afternoon, I decided I had to speak with someone. Someone who wasn't slipping into shadows or pretending nothing was happening. Brother Anselm seemed like the obvious choice. He's older than most of us, steady, a man whose very presence used to quiet a room. If there was a rational explanation for the madness creeping through our halls, he would know it. Or so I told myself. I found him alone in the garden, leaning over the rosemary bushes. For a moment he didn't notice me, and I watched him tug at the stems. Not harvesting, just pulling, nerves showing in the tension of his shoulders. When he finally looked up, his eyes were ringed dark with fatigue. "Brother," he said, "you're pale." "I haven't slept well," I admitted. "None of us have, I think." His jaw tightened, like he already regretted acknowledging the problem. I told him everything, well, almost everything. I didn't mention the whisper in the cloister. Somehow it felt too personal, too targeted. But I told him about the missing codex, the open chest, the strange voices during prime, the tension, the lies. As I spoke, he kept nodding slowly, like each word added weight to a burden he already knew he was carrying. When I finished, he closed his eyes, exhaled long, and said something I didn't expect. "You must keep these thoughts to yourself." I felt my stomach drop. "Brother, something is wrong here. We can't all be imagining. You must keep these thoughts to yourself," he repeated, sharper this time. "There are matters you are not meant to understand." That phrase, "not meant to understand," landed like a blow. We spend our lives copying scripture, arguing theology, seeking truth. And now truth was suddenly off limits? I tried to push back. "If a danger threatens the abbey." "There is no danger," he snapped. Then, seeing my expression, he softened, but it was the softness of someone smoothing dirt over a grave. "Some things are simply not for you to question." "Brother Anselm," I whispered, "someone opened the chest at night. That codex is missing. And you know as well as I do what stories cling to that book." His face went still, completely still. Then he leaned in, so close I felt his breath on my ear. "You must not speak of the codex again," he murmured. "Not to me, not to anyone. And you must not ask who opened the chest." A chill ran through me, one of those cold, hollow chills that feel less like fear and more like recognition of something terrible. I stepped back. "Brother, why?" His answer was barely audible. "Because whoever opened it is still here." And then, God help me. He looked past my shoulder, as though someone stood directly behind me. But when I turned, the garden path was empty. I spent the rest of the day feeling like my thoughts were wrapped in wool, muted, smothered, unable to settle. Brother Anselm's warning clung to me like incense in my hair. Whoever opened it is still here. I kept replaying the way he'd looked past my shoulder, the way his face had drained of color. Anselm is not a man easily rattled. I've seen him tend the dying, rebuke the proud, and once quiet an entire room of bickering monks with just a raised hand. But that moment in the garden, he looked afraid, truly afraid, and that frightened me more than anything else. By dusk, the air in the abbey felt charged, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. Even the birds on the roof beams were restless. They kept fluttering from perch to perch, clicking their beaks in agitation. I noticed small things too. Candles guttering without wind, doors nudging open though no one passed, the faint smell of wet stone in rooms that should have been dry. During Vespers, Brother Paul collapsed mid-chant, just folded to the floor like a puppet whose strings had snapped. 2 brothers carried him out, but his eyes, they were open, staring at the rafters as if he saw something up there the rest of us couldn't. And the abbot didn't pause the prayers, didn't even glance after him. After the service, I approached one of the brothers who had carried Paul, Brother Julian. He's usually kind, gentle as spring rain. But when I asked how Paul was doing, Julian froze, his hands tightening around the edge of his robe. "He's resting," Julian said. "Resting how? Do not ask." He walked away before I could say another word. I swear, every time I try to reach for truth here, someone swats my hand away like I'm a child reaching too close to the fire. That night, everything finally cracked. Just after the bell for Compline, while we filed toward the chapel, a sound tore through the hallway, a metallic clatter, followed by what I can only describe as chanting. But not Latin, not any language I've ever heard. Low, rhythmic, like a prayer said backwards. The brothers ignored it. Ignored it. Some of them even walked faster, as though the sound were a nuisance rather than a nightmare echoing down the hall. I hesitated. That was enough to separate me from the group. And once the others turned the corner, I was alone in the dark corridor, heart thudding against my ribs like a fist on a door. The chanting continued, closer now, as if the walls themselves were speaking. Then a shadow moved at the far end of the hall. A tall figure, hooded, robed, not in our brown wool, but in something darker, slicker, almost wet-looking. For a moment I thought it was a trick of the lamp flame, but no, the figure turned its head toward me. I felt it, felt its attention like a physical weight. My mouth went dry, my legs went cold, and then someone grabbed me from behind. A hand clamped over my mouth. Another arm wrapped hard around my chest, pulling me back into a side alcove. I struggled. God forgive me, I panicked, but the grip only tightened. "Be still," a voice whispered urgently. Human, breathless, familiar. I went still. Brother Matthew released me long enough to press a finger to his lips. His face was pale, slick with sweat, his eyes wild with fear. "You should not walk alone at night," he hissed. I started to speak, but he shook his head violently. Then he leaned close, voice trembling. "They're looking for someone, and I think—" His eyes darted toward the dark hallway, where the chanting had begun to fade. "I think they believe it's you." A chill descended on me so deeply that even my bones felt cold. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to ask who they were. But Matthew pushed me back into the shadows and whispered, "Do not ask questions. Not now. Just keep your door barred tonight." Then he left. Actually ran. leaving me alone in the dim alcove, the taste of fear thick at the back of my throat. I didn't go to Compline. I crept back to the dormitory, bolted my door, and prayed until my voice failed. But even then, long after midnight, I heard footsteps outside my cell. Slow, heavy, pausing at my door. And then, 3 soft knocks. I've lived through storms that rattled the roof tiles loose, through winters so bitter our breath hovered like ghosts above our beds. But nothing, has ever filled me with the kind of dread those 3 knocks did. They weren't loud. They weren't even forceful. Just deliberate, as if whoever stood outside my cell door wanted me to know they could knock louder if they wished. The wood vibrated with each gentle tap, like a heartbeat answered by another heartbeat. I sat frozen on my cot, my rosary tangled in my fists. For a moment, I thought it might be Brother Matthew. Maybe he'd come back to warn me, or maybe fear had pushed him to seek company. But something in the rhythm of those knocks, a strange patience, almost polite, told me this wasn't a frightened monk. I whispered, "Who's there?" Even though every part of me knew I didn't want the answer. Silence. But the shadows under the door shifted, slowly, like something heavy had leaned down to listen. My breath caught in my throat. I could feel it, the presence just beyond the wood. Watching, waiting. A voice finally came, low and smooth, muffled by the door. I swear I'd never heard it before, not among the brothers, not even among the villagers who come for confession. "Brother," it said. Just that one word, but it rolled strangely, as if the speaker had learned our language by imitating only the sound, not the meaning. I didn't answer, couldn't. The voice spoke again, softer this time. "You have something that was taken." My skin prickled from scalp to heel. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might give me away. I forced out, I have nothing. I don't know what you mean." A long pause. Then a whisper right against the crack beneath the door, closer than before, as though lips pressed to the wood. "Return it." The same words from the cloister, the same tone, like an order disguised as a request. I stumbled back from the door, knocking over a stool. The sound must have startled the figure, because I heard the faintest scrape, cloth brushing stone, like someone shifting their weight. Then footsteps, slow ones at first, then quicker, then gone. But the moment they faded down the hall, another sound rose in their absence. Chanting again. That guttural, reverse-sounding chant. The walls seemed to absorb it, as if the abbey itself hummed with its cadence. For a few breaths, I thought I might faint. When I finally worked up the courage to approach the door, I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No footsteps. No whisper. Only the distant howl of wind against the cloister arches. I must have stayed that way for nearly an hour, afraid that any movement from me might summon those 3 soft knocks again. Eventually the chanting stopped. The wind settled. The monastery sank into what should have been ordinary silence, but felt more like a held breath. I didn't sleep. I barely moved. I just sat with my back against the door, knees drawn up, the rosary wound so tight around my fingers the beads left marks. By dawn, I'd made up my mind about one thing. If something or someone believes I'm responsible for the missing codex, then my ignorance won't protect me. Pretending not to see the danger won't stop it from seeing me. And if the brothers know more than they're admitting, then I need to find someone who will finally speak the truth. Even if the truth is worse than the fear. I waited until the sun was fully up before daring to leave my cell. Even then, I opened the door the way a man might lift a stone he expects a serpent beneath, slowly, braced for the strike. But nothing stood in the hallway. No shadow. No whisper. Just the morning light stretching thinly across the stones. The abbey felt a hollow, too quiet, even for dawn. At breakfast, the brothers kept their heads low. The scrape of wooden spoons felt louder than usual, and the reader's voice trembled as he read from the homily. No one looked at me directly, but I caught several glances from the edges of sleeves, quick, assessing, withdrawn, like they were watching to see if I would break, or if I would speak. I felt eyes on me even when I wasn't being watched. After the meal, I knew I had to confront someone. Someone who wasn't already steeped in avoidance or half-truths. Brother Matthew had warned me, but then vanished. Brother Anselm refused to speak further. And the abbot, I wasn't ready to face him yet. But Brother Odo, quiet, nervous Odo, he had always worn his emotions on his sleeves. And lately he'd been the jitteriest of all. Fear makes tongues slip. I found him in the warming room, huddled near the brazier, rubbing his hands like he couldn't get warm. His eyes darted to the doorway when I entered, then away again. "Brother Odo," I said gently, "may I speak with you?" He flinched, actually flinched. If it is about my duties today, It's not," I said, stepping closer. "It's about what's been happening, about the noises at night, the missing book, the visits." His breath caught. He stared at me like I'd spoken a forbidden name. For a moment I thought he might actually answer, that something inside him was ready to spill over. His mouth even opened a little, trembling. But then, something shifted in the hallway behind me. Not a sound. Not even a shadow. Just attention. The way the air tightens when someone stands in a doorway, unseen. Odo's eyes widened. Whatever courage he had gathered drained out of his face. "I can't," he whispered. I can't speak of it. Don't ask me to." "Odo," I said, keeping my voice low. "Someone knocked at my cell last night. Someone said I had something that was taken. You must tell me what you know." He shook his head violently. "No. No, brother. If you ask questions, they'll think you're involved. And if they think you're involved," he swallowed hard, "you'll end up like Brother Paul." A cold ripple moved through my chest. What happened to Brother Paul? Odo looked at the doorway again, the invisible watcher I couldn't see. Then he leaned forward just an inch and whispered, "Not all illnesses come from the body." A chill climbed my spine. Before I could press further, another voice echoed down the hall. "Odo, are you in here?" It was Brother Julian. His tone was innocent enough, but Odo's reaction was immediate and terrified. He seized my sleeve and hissed, "Go, please, before you're seen with me." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, to shake the truth out of him. But the panic in his eyes felt genuine, almost childlike. So I left. But as I stepped into the corridor, I heard Julian's voice soften, almost coaxing. "Odo, you weren't telling him anything, were you?" Silence. Then a muffled, terrified, "No, no, brother, I swear." I walked away before I could hear more, because part of me feared I already knew how that conversation would end. And worse, part of me feared Odo might not survive it. I didn't see Brother Odo again that day. Not at Sext, not at the midday meal, not even in the garden where he usually went to calm his nerves. Every absence felt like a missing stitch in a garment already coming apart. By none. I knew something was deeply wrong, but no one else seemed concerned, or they pretended not to be. The abbot's homily was unusually short, delivered in a cold, clipped tone that made the brothers look down at their feet. Brother Julian stood near the doorway the entire time, hands folded, but his gaze roamed like a guard watching prisoners. I kept replaying what Odo had said. Not all illnesses come from the body. And worse, you'll end up like Brother Paul. Paul who had collapsed mid-chant. Paul who had been carried away like a broken vessel. Paul whose cell door had remained shut all day. The rule of our order states that when a brother is gravely ill, someone should sit with him, pray, keep vigil, ensure he is not alone as he struggles. Yet no one had been assigned to Brother Paul. No candles lit outside his door. No whispered prayers. Nothing. Just silence. That silence gnawed at me until I could no longer bear it. So, after none, when the brothers dispersed to their tasks, I slipped away from the cloister walk and made my way to Paul's cell. I passed 2 monks in the corridor who averted their eyes as though my face were a flame too bright. When I reached the door, I hesitated. The wood looked different, darker, as if dampness had seeped into it. and the air around it was colder than the rest of the hall. A cold that felt purposeful. I pressed my ear to the surface. First, nothing. Nobres. No rustle of cloth. But then, just as I started to pull away, I heard something faint and irregular. Tapping. Soft. Uneven. Like fingernails against stone. "Brother Paul," I whispered. The tapping stopped. My pulse thundered in my throat. I tried the latch. Locked. We don't lock doors in the dormitory. There's no need. Trust is supposed to reign here as surely as Christ. Yet Paul's was bolted from the outside with an iron latch I had never seen used before. I looked up and down the hallway. Empty. My heart hammered as I bent closer to the crack at the bottom of the door. The cold pushed against my face like breath. "Paul," I whispered again. "If you can hear me, please make a sign." For a moment, there was nothing. Then, something scraped across the floor from inside the cell. Slowly. Dragging. Heavy. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something else. The hairs on my arms bristled so sharply it hurt. I took a shaky step back. My mind warred between fear and duty. Should I fetch the abbot? Should I run? Should I break the door down myself? Before I could decide, a shadow fell across the hallway. I spun around. It was the abbot. He stood utterly still, hands folded, eyes unreadable. But there was something in the set of his jaw, something hard, ancient, and cold. "Brother," he said softly, "why are you here?" I opened my mouth, but the words stuck like thorns in my throat. He stepped closer. "Curiosity," he said, "is a dangerous temptation, especially now." "Father Abbot," I managed. "I only wish to check on Brother Paul. He may be in pain." The abbot's voice remained calm, almost gentle. "Brother Paul is being tended to. You need not trouble yourself." "But the door is locked," he said. "Because some sickness of spirit can spread through mere presence." A chill ran down my spine. I whispered, "Has he said anything?" The abbot's eyes sharpened, not with anger, but with something colder. "He has said enough." A long silence stretched between us. Then he placed a hand on my shoulder. The weight of it felt like an anchor pulling me downward. "You will stay away from this cell," he murmured, "for your own sake, and for the sake of the community." Then, with a thin, brittle smile, "Obedience is the highest virtue now." I bowed my head because I had no choice. But as I walked away, I knew, absolutely knew, that something was happening behind that locked door. Something neither illness nor prayer could explain. And whatever it was getting stronger. I didn't intend to disobey the abbot, not directly, at least. But fear has a way of shaking the rule loose from a man's hands. And by the time the bell rang for vespers, my mind felt stretched thin, like parchment scraped too many times. I needed something. A sign, a reassurance, a word from God. Anything to anchor me. So I went to the chapel early. The others were still in the cloister, so the place was empty, save for the lingering smell of incense and the faint echo of my own footsteps on the flagstones. Normally the chapel soothes me instantly. The gold leaf on the icons, the flickering candles, the hush of the vaulted ceiling gathering every prayer like a cupped hand. But that evening, even the sanctuary felt wrong. The shadows clung too closely to the corners. The candles guttered despite the still air. And the great icon of St. Michael above the altar, the one whose painted eyes always seemed stern yet protective, looked different, tilted somehow, watching me with an attention I wasn't sure I wanted. I knelt anyway. Habit can be stronger than fear. My prayer began as all prayers do. "O Lord, incline thine ear." But my thoughts tangled almost immediately, fear tugging on one thread, doubt on another. Words slipped, then dissolved completely, leaving only a low, desperate murmuring. I pressed my forehead to my clasped hands. "God," I whispered, "if there is deception in this house, reveal it. If there is danger, guide me. If I am straying into darkness, pull me back. Please, please." Silence. Then, A sound behind me, not footsteps, breathing, slow, steady, close. I turned, expecting, hoping for a brother entering early. But no one was there. Only the empty pews, the dark doorway, the faint scent of something metallic, like blood on iron. My heart pounded so loudly I could feel it in my teeth. I stood, backing toward the altar. "Who's there?" I asked, though I didn't want an answer. The breathing stopped. And then, God have mercy. The candles along the left wall flickered out one by one. Not with the randomness of wind, but in a precise sequence, as though something walked past them. Coming toward me, I froze. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped my rosary. For a moment, all was dark except the single altar candle. Its flame stretched tall and thin, as though straining away from something. A shadow appeared across the altar cloth. Not mine. Tall, distorted, shoulders too broad, head bowed as though listening, or studying. I tried to speak, but all that left my mouth was a dry gasp. The shadow raised one arm, and the icon of Saint Michael, the painted figure in gold and red, moved. Not much. Not enough that anyone else would swear they saw it. Just the slightest tilt of the head downward, toward me, as if the archangel were trying to warn me, or judge me, or something far more terrible. A pressure built behind my eyes, like a hand pushing inward. Then a voice, not spoken aloud, but inside my skull, rang like a struck bell. "You are being prepared." My knees buckled. I clutched the altar rail for support as dizziness washed over me. The chapel blurred. Shadows stretched. The air throbbed like a heartbeat. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure vanished. The candles flared back to life. The breathing was gone. The shadow was gone. St. Michael's painted eyes stared straight ahead again, cold and unmoved. I stumbled backward, nearly falling against a pew. Sweat dripped down my neck despite the chill in the room. Prepared for what? The words pulsed in my mind like an infection. Just then the door opened and Brother Julian entered, his expression unreadable. "You're early," he said, voice flat. I could only nod. But something in his gaze lingered on me too long, as if checking how much the vision had touched me. And in that moment I realized something gut-deep and unavoidable. Whatever is happening in this monastery isn't just around me. It's reaching for me, and the brothers know it. I spent most of Vespers trembling. Not outwardly, God forbid, but somewhere deep beneath the ribs, where fear takes root and grows in secret. The vision in the chapel had left me hollow, as though something had reached inside and scraped away a piece of me. Through the chanting I kept hearing that terrible phrase, "You are being prepared." Prepared for what? Prepared by whom? After Vespers, the abbot asked me to stay behind. He said it politely, almost kindly, the way he might ask a novice to refill the oil lamps. But there was an undercurrent in his tone, a gravity that made my blood run cold. When the others had left, he shut the chapel door. The click of the latch echoed like the sealing of a tomb. He approached slowly, hands folded into the sleeves of his habit. At first he said nothing, only looked at me with a strange mixture of pity and calculation, like a man examining a cracked vessel to decide whether it can still hold wine. "Brother," he began at last, "you seem troubled." I swallowed. "Father Abbot, there are things happening that I don't understand." "Yes," he said softly, "there are." I blinked. I hadn't expected honesty. "Then you know?" I asked. He smiled, a small smile, thin, controlled, but not warm, never warm. "There are forces at work in every monastery, in every heart," he said. "Some divine, some less so. Our task is to discern which is which." I felt the hair on my neck rise. "Father, last night, someone came to my door. Someone demanded that I return something. And in the chapel, I fought the words, unsure how much to reveal. I saw something that wasn't natural." The abbot's eyes flickered, just a fraction, but enough. "Visions," he murmured. are not always curses. Sometimes they are invitations. I stepped back from him. Not deliberately, my body simply reacted. I don't want an invitation, I said. Most prophets do not, he replied. His choice of that word, prophet, hit me like a blow to the chest. Father, I said, my voice shaking now. Whatever is happening, I fear it's not holy. At this, the abbot reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. His touch was firm, possessive almost. Fear, he said, is the first obstacle to revelation. What you witnessed tonight was not meant to harm you. It was meant to guide you. I stared at him, stunned. Guide me where? Into madness. His smile widened barely, but unmistakably. Madness and sanctity have always shared a border thinner than parchment. My breath stalled in my lungs. Father, please, what is happening to Brother Paul? The abbot's smile vanished instantly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that coiled into my ear like smoke. Brother Paul was not ready. A chill carved its way down my spine. And am I whispered. His eyes, usually mild and hooded, shone with something sharp and fever-bright. That, he said, is what we are trying to discover. I staggered back from him, horrified. Whatever is happening, I want no part of it. His expression softened again, disturbingly gentle. My son, he murmured. You don't have a choice. Then the chapel door opened. Brother Julian stood there, rigid as a sentry. Father Abbot, he said, the brothers await you. The abbot nodded once, then turned back to me. Go to your rest, he said, and do not wander tonight. Then he left with Julian, the door closing behind them with a sound like a verdict. I stood alone in the chapel, trembling from head to heel. No part of me believed the abbot's words were meant for my safety. They were a warning, promise, and as I walked back through the darkening cloister, I couldn't shake the feeling that the entire monastery, its walls, its shadows, its silence, was closing in around me, preparing me for something I did not want to meet. I truly tried, to obey the abbot's warning. After what I'd seen, after the way his voice had coiled around my fear like a hand tightening on a rope, I wanted nothing more than to bar my door, hide beneath my blanket like a child, and pray until dawn scoured the darkness clean. But the monastery would not let me rest. Not that night. I sat on my cot for what felt like hours, listening to the silence thicken. It wasn't the peaceful stillness we sometimes have after Compline. It was watchful, as though the very air were waiting to see what I would do. My candle flickered strangely, guttering not downward but sideways, as if something breathed across it. And though I kept telling myself not to imagine things, I couldn't shake the sense that the walls themselves had drawn closer. I was so tired my bones ached, but sleep refused me. Every time my eyes drifted shut, I saw the shadow moving across the altar, the candle bending away from it, the archangel's painted head tilting ever so slightly toward me. You are being prepared. I must have whispered, Lord have mercy, 100 times. It was sometime past midnight when I heard them. Footsteps. Not outside in the hallway, inside the dormitory. Slow. Deliberate. More than one pair. I froze. My breath snagged in my throat. The sound moved between the rows of sleeping brothers. Soft leather soles, gliding, stopping, resuming. No whispering. No murmuring. Just the bare, unmistakable presence of men who did not want to wake anyone, and yet didn't care if they woke someone in particular. My skin crawled. I slipped silently from my cot and knelt beside it, heart hammering in my ears. My cell door wasn't locked. I'd meant to lock it but forgotten, my mind too clouded with dread. I could only kneel there, helpless, praying they would pass me by. But the steps drew closer. Creaking floorboard, then another, right outside my cell. I squeezed my eyes shut. My hands clutched my rosary so tightly the beads cut into my palms. The breathing came first, low, controlled. More than one person, then a whisper just outside my door. His light was too bright. Another voice responded, deeper, almost mournful. Not yet, but soon. A third voice, soft, familiar in a way that twisted my stomach, added, the abbot says he resists. Resistance is the final veil. Their words were not threatening in tone, but that only made them worse. It was the calmness, the serene acceptance that chilled me to the core, as if they spoke of chores or weather, not of me. For one terrible moment I thought they might enter. The latch rattled. I bit down on a gasp so hard I tasted blood. But then something changed in the hall. A faint sound, like distant humming or chanting drifting from under the floor itself. The brothers outside inhaled sharply. One whispered, almost reverently, "It moves again." Their footsteps retreated swiftly, no longer slow or deliberate, but eager. They hurried down the hallway, following whatever unseen pull had summoned them. I waited until I could no longer hear them. Even then, I stayed kneeling, too weak to stand. When I finally rose and peered through the crack in my door, I saw nothing in the hallway but moonlight pooling across the stones. Yet my fear did not ease. Because the voices I heard, I recognized one of them, Brother Julian, and the other two, though I couldn't place them, felt disturbingly familiar, as if I knew their cadence from years of chanting beside them. My brothers had walked the dormitory in the night, speaking of me as though I were some object being tested, weighed, prepared. And whatever moved again, whatever they followed, it was not God. I no longer know whom I can trust, or whether trust has any place left in this house. But one thing has settled heavily into my heart. If the monks of St. Michael's have lost themselves to something, I need to find out how deep it has gone, and whether there is still time to save any of us. All the next day, the monastery felt wrong in a new way. Quieter, yes, but also emptier, as though something essential had slipped out of place. I kept waiting for someone to confront me about the night before, to accuse me of waking, listening, overhearing. But no one spoke to me at all, not even in passing. The silence became its own kind of pressure. By midday I felt feverish, restless, not from illness but from knowledge. Knowledge I did not want yet couldn't shake. The brothers wandering the dormitory, their whispered conversation, the phrase, "It moves again." What was it? I had to know. But how do you investigate truth in a monastery where lies have become the new liturgy? I tried to observe the brothers during their work. They seemed distant. Their gaze slipped past me like water over stone. Even those who once greeted me warmly now acted as though I belonged to another order altogether. The abbot avoided my eyes entirely. By vespers, I decided I needed to search the dormitory. Not during daylight, too many glances tracking my movements, but after Compline, when the brothers returned to their cells. I waited until their breathing settled, a familiar chorus of soft rustles and slow exhales. Only then did I slip from my cot. My feet were bare. The stone was bitterly cold. I moved carefully, avoiding the creaking boards I'd learned by heart over the years. My whole body felt wound-tight, strung like a psaltery string pulled too far. I went first to the place where I'd heard the brothers stop the night before, 2 paces from my cell, near the second column. And there, when I knelt and pressed my palm to the floor, I felt it immediately. Warmth. Not heat like fire, warmth like breath. Slow, steady, living. The stone beneath my hand pulsed. I snatched my hand back, heart pounding. For a moment I thought it was my imagination. But when I reached again, hesitantly, the warmth returned. The same steady rhythm, like a heart beneath the floor. I whispered a shaky prayer, but the words stumbled on my tongue. Then I noticed something else. Faint scratches around the edges of the stone slab. Marks not made by time, but by fingers. Desperate fingers, clawing upward. A chill shot through me so sharply it stole my breath. Someone had tried to open this. Recently, I dug my fingertips under the edge. The stone shifted, just barely, but enough to confirm it could be moved. And beneath it, I smelled something damp, metallic, and disturbingly familiar. like the air near Brother Paul's door. I managed to lift the slab a finger's breadth. Enough to hear it, a sound rising from the darkness below. Not chanting, not breathing, something between the two. A low, rhythmic murmuring, layered upon itself, like many voices speaking the same phrase in different cadences. And underneath that, a faint scraping, as though something stirred in a narrow space. I froze. A whisper curled upward through the gap, soft as dust.
Come closer.
I dropped the stone slab so quickly it cracked against the floor. The sound echoed through the dormitory like a shout. I stood there shaking, waiting for the brothers to wake, to confront me. But none stirred. Not one shifted in his bed, as though they hadn't heard it at all. Or, more terrifying still, as though they expected it. I backed away from the slab, breath trembling in my throat. Whatever lies beneath this monastery, it is not a relic, not a saint's tomb, not anything built by our order. If the brothers have been serving it, feeding it, then everything I thought I knew about them has already rotted through. And if it has awakened, then I may already be too late. I barely slept after my discovery beneath the floor. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt again that warmth pulsing through stone, the slow, patient rhythm of something waiting, something alive, the whisper curling up from the darkness. Come closer. By dawn my nerves were frayed, and my hands shook so badly I spilled half the washwater on the dormitory floor. No one commented. No one even looked at me. The brothers moved about like sleepwalkers, eyes hollow, steps strangely synchronized, as though listening to something I couldn't hear. It wasn't until after prime that Brother Matthew appeared at my side. No greeting, no pretense. Just a pale, frantic face in the hallway, his fingers clamping around my wrist with surprising strength. "Walk with me," he whispered. Before I could protest, he pulled me into the narrow passage beside the grain store, a place rarely used except during harvest. Dust clung to every beam. The air was still. When he finally released my wrist, I saw his hands shaking. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Any of us. You especially." My heart thudded. "Matthew, what's happening to the brothers?" He glanced over his shoulder, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "They're listening," he whispered. "All the time now, even when they seem silent." "Listening to what?" He swallowed, throat bobbing.
No.
"Not what? Who?" A wave of cold washed through me. Matthew stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was barely breath. "Do you remember when Brother Paul collapsed? That wasn't an illness." He heard it speak to him directly. The abbot said Paul had been chosen, but that wasn't true. Paul resisted. He tried to warn us. "Warn us about what?" I pressed. Matthew shook his head violently. "You wouldn't believe me." "I will." His eyes brimmed, not with tears, but with terror. "It's beneath us," he whispered. "Not buried, not sleeping, waiting." And the abbot, God forgive him, he thinks it's a divine revelation. He thinks your visions mean it has marked you. My breath hitched. Marked me? For what? Matthew didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my sleeve again. "You must leave. Tonight before Compline. There won't be another chance." My mind reeled. Leave the monastery? Without permission. I'd be excommunicated. "To stay is worse," he said flatly. "The others, they're already half given over, listening to its voice, feeding it with their obedience." I felt sick. "Matthew, last night I heard them, Julian and 2 others. They were searching the dormitory." "I know," he said. "I heard them too." Who were they looking for? It was a foolish question. I already knew the answer. Matthew closed his eyes briefly, like a man bracing for pain. "You!" My knees weakened. The hallway suddenly felt too small, too dark. "You must go," he said again, urgency sharpening his whisper. "If they take you below, if you hear it the way Paul did, you won't come back. Not as yourself." I stared at him, stunned. "Why are you helping me?" Matthew's expression softened. grief and guilt mixing in his features. "Because I didn't help Paul," he whispered, "and because I still hear my own thoughts, barely. A few more days, and I fear even that will be gone." That truth hit me harder than any warning. He was slipping, losing himself while he still struggled to hold on. A distant bell rang, the signal for the brothers to gather in the cloister. Matthew flinched. "Go," he urged, "before someone notices we're missing." I reached for him. "Come with me." He shook his head once, sharply. "It won't let me. I'm already too close to the others." Then he stepped back, voice cracking. "Please, save yourself while you still can." The last thing he said before disappearing down the passage chilled me deeper than the whispers beneath the floor. "Tonight, they'll come for you." The rest of the day passed in a haze. Every sound sharpened, every shadow deepened, every brother's glance feeling like a net thrown over me. Matthew's warning clung to me like a second skin. "Tonight, they'll come for you." I repeated it in my mind through the afternoon offices, through our labors in the garden, through the quiet supper where no one met my eyes. Even the sky seemed to sense the tension. Clouds gathered low and heavy, pressing the horizon into a bruised dark line. I kept looking for Matthew, hoping for one last glimpse of him, some sign he hadn't already been swallowed by the force dragging the brothers toward obedience. But I didn't see him at all. Not in the refectory, not in the cloister, not in the dormitory. It was as if he had already slipped out of the world. By the time the bell rang for Compline, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely lace my belt. I knew what I had to do. Leave before the brothers gathered. Slip out through the garden gate. Flee down the southern hill where the stream cut through the forest. The moon would be half full, enough light to guide me, not enough to expose me. I waited until the first echo of the bell faded. The brothers began filing toward the chapel, worn sandals brushing stone, voices murmuring in the monotone cadence of prayer. I kept my door closed until the last footstep passed. Then I slipped out. The hallway was empty, but the air felt charged, as if it too were listening for my next move. I forced myself forward, keeping close to the wall, past the dormitory, past the refectory, around the bend where a faint draft signaled the proximity of the garden cloister. Each step felt like its own prayer. When I reached the cloister arch, I saw the open courtyard bathed in muted moonlight. A faint mist hovered above the ground, curling around the walkway like pale fingers. The garden gate lay at the far end, ironwork old and rusted, but still functional. I only needed a minute, less even, and I'd be free. Free of the whispers, free of the warm, pulsing stone, free of Julian's dead-eyed stare. I moved quickly but quietly, eyes fixed on the gate. But halfway across the courtyard, a figure stepped out from behind the central column. Brother Julian. His hands were folded. His expression was calm. Too calm. "Brother," he said softly, "why are you not in Compline?" My heart lurched violently. I needed air," I stammered. "My mind has been troubled." He stepped closer. The mist swirled around his ankles like something summoned by him alone. "These troubled nights test us all. But wandering is not wise." My pulse hammered in my ears. "I meant no disobedience." "Obedience," he echoed, "is the only path to safety now." His eyes flicked, not subtly, toward the gate behind me. And that was when I knew he wasn't alone. I heard the soft crunch of sandaled feet behind the columns. More than one pair. They were waiting for me to run, waiting to herd me where they wanted. My breath tightened. Panic clawed up my throat. Julian extended a hand, not threateningly, but gently, the way one coaxes a frightened animal. "Come, brother," he murmured. "It is time." Time for what? Time for below? Time for whatever pulsed under the dormitory floor? Something in me broke free. Fear became motion. I bolted. Not toward the gate, they expected that. Instead I sprinted toward the cloister walk, veered left, and slipped behind the column where Julian had first appeared. Their shouts rose instantly, echoing off the stone. "Stop him! Do not let him reach! Block the west passage!" I didn't wait to hear more. I ran, bare feet slapping stone, breath ragged, habit whipping around my legs. I darted through the cloister and into the side passage leading toward the old library, an area half abandoned, seldom patrolled. Behind me, footsteps thundered in pursuit. I prayed not for courage, not for safety, but simply for speed. Just before turning the final corner, I risked a glance back. Julian was right behind the others, his face illuminated by torchlight. But his expression, that terrified me more than anything. He wasn't angry. He was smiling. I didn't stop running until the walls around me changed. Smooth stone giving way to rougher masonry, the air shifting from torch-warm to cold and stale. The old library loomed ahead, its doorway half-collapsed, draped in dust like a widow's veil. No one came here anymore. Not for study, not for prayer, not for anything holy, which made it the only place left to hide. I slipped inside, pressed my back against the wall, and forced myself to breathe, slow, quiet, controlled. Outside, footsteps thundered past. Voices rose, frantic, echoing through the cloister. "He turned this way. No, check the refectory. Spread out." But Julian's voice stayed calm, steady, horribly confident. "He cannot leave. The monastery has already chosen him." I squeezed my eyes shut. My heartbeat throbbed in my throat. I had no plan, no weapon, no ally I could trust. Matthew had tried to help me, yes. But by now, who knew what had become of him? When the voices finally faded, I sagged to the floor, shaking. The library smelled of mold and forgotten parchment. Broken shelves leaned like gravestones. A single shaft of moonlight fell through the cracked ceiling, illuminating floating dust motes that drifted like lost souls. I stayed there for I don't know how long, minutes or hours, listening, waiting, trying not to imagine footsteps creeping silently toward me. Only when the night grew very still did a strange peace settle over me. Not safety, not comfort, but clarity. I couldn't stay. Not here. Not anywhere within these walls. Matthew was right. If they found me, I would be taken below, drawn toward that warmth pulsing beneath the stone, bent to whatever will had already swallowed the others. I would lose myself, piece by piece, prayer by prayer, thought by thought. So I rose. My legs trembled, but they held. I crept toward the back of the library where a narrow servant's door, long unused, opened to the outer walk along the storage yards. It wasn't locked, just swollen with neglect. I pushed. The wood groaned softly, but not loudly enough to summon anyone. Cold night air flooded over me. Real air, untainted by incense or whispered rituals or hidden breathing beneath the floor. I stepped out. One step, then another. Every footfall felt like tearing a page from a book I was never meant to finish. When I reached the low wall at the monastery's edge, I paused and looked back. St. Michael's Abbey stood quiet, solemn, serene, beautiful, even bathed in moonlight. If someone saw it from afar, they'd think the brothers inside were chanting their psalms, copying their sacred texts, living holy lives in holy rhythm. They would never imagine the darkness coiling beneath those stones. I slipped down the hill into the tall grass. The forest waited at the bottom like an open mouth. I did not stop walking, not even when I heard distant bells, rung for the hour, ringing in broken intervals, as though rung by many hands all at once. Not even when I thought I heard my name drifting through the night wind, soft and coaxing. I walked until my feet blistered, until the abbey lights vanished behind the trees, until dawn began to warm the horizon with gentle, human light. Only then did I let myself fall to my knees, not to pray, at least not in the way I once prayed, but to breathe, to feel my own thoughts again, to ask, quietly trembling, whether I had abandoned my vocation or preserved it. And now, writing this in the shelter of a pilgrim barn offered by kind strangers who do not ask why my habit is torn or why my eyes keep searching the shadows. I find I have no final answers, only reflections and warnings. I learned that faith is not blindness. Fear is not failure. Obedience can be twisted into a weapon. And holiness can wear a mask so convincing even saints might weep to see what lies beneath. If you, reader, whoever you are, ever find yourself facing signs that do not align with the peace God promises, if your leaders speak in riddles and your companions move like sleepers caught in another's dream, if something whispers from beneath your feet and calls it revelation, listen to your fear, listen to your doubt. They may be the last things that still belong to you. As for me, I do not know where my road leads, only that it leads away from St. Michael's, and that whatever waits beneath that monastery will not stop seeking a voice to speak through. I pray, truly, desperately, that it will never find mine again.